So, let's grab my paper. This broadcasting is ready. Yep. I will reopen this hearing of the Regional and Rural Affairs and Transports Committee, and I now welcome Mr. Elliott to represent. Oh, sorry, I don't welcome you because we had a change of order, didn't we? Sorry, give me 1 second. I'll welcome Mr. Lynch from the Transport Workers Union. And I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Sam Lynch, Director of Organising for the Transport Workers Union for Victoria and Tasmania.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your submission. You have an opportunity to make a short opening statement if you wish. Would you like to do so?
Yes.
Okay, over to you, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to the committee for accommodating the time changes this morning. And unfortunately, and ironically, I was delayed on a Keeling flight coming out of Sydney, so but I appreciate the understanding. The Transport Workers Union represents thousands of aviation workers right across the country, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the aviation industry across our country at the moment is in crisis. We've seen that with the collapse of Bonza. We've seen that with the administration of RRAT. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing that it's regional Australia that is copping the brunt of this industry in crisis. We saw a High Court decision a few months ago which found that Qantas had illegally sacked 1,820 workers. We also saw the High Court found that although Qantas apologised, that it might have been the wrong kind of apology, not a genuine apology, but rather trying to say the right thing. And we're concerned that this latest decision to relocate workers from Hobart and from Mildura and from the ACT confirms the High Court judge's worst suspicions in this case. We want to work with Qantas. We want to see Qantas succeed, not just for the thousands of members that we represent that work in Qantas or Qantas supply chains or subsidiaries, but also for the millions of Australians that rely on Qantas every year. The workers that have been relocated as a result of this decision by QLink, they are real people, real lives. They have families based out of these cities. Many of these workers have only 3 or 4 years ago were forced to relocate from other cities under the promise that they could have a long-term career in Hobart in particular, only to a few years later find out they were once again being relocated. They have kids in school, they have wives and husbands with jobs, and at the drop of a hat and at the whim of a decision by QLink with very limited consultation, they are now having to totally uproot their lives and the disruptions to themselves and their families as a result of that. We had one of our members tell us that leaving Hobart will mean no longer seeing my children. It's going to split my family up. And I think that quote really does drive home the human reality of this decision. It's clear that, and I know Qantas, in Qantas' decision, they've said that this decision will increase or decrease cancellations. It is clear, though, that this decision, in closing these bases, will mean fewer permanent crews based in these regional cities, which will necessarily cause more cancellations and reduce resilience for people that are flying out of those cities. So once again, we're seeing that it is regional Australia, and I know that there's many senators on this committee that come from regional Australia, as I do. It's regional Australia that is suffering or copying the worst impacts of this decision. As we saw with Bonza and RRAT, this is an industry in crisis, and we are going to need to see wholesale change. As I said before, we really want to see Qantas succeed, and I think that Australia needs to see Qantas succeed. This decision reflects what we're referring to as the old Qantas, the Joyce-era Qantas, and we saw Alan Joyce's unfortunate comments during the week about industrial relation laws in this country. what we are asking for Qantas, we're asking that they reverse this decision and allow these workers to remain in their base. But we're also saying that in the future, we are going to need more consultation and more genuine consideration of the well-being of workers, but also of the communities that rely on Qantas's services, and less of this ruthless race to the bottom strategies that Qantas are endeavouring upon. We are also calling upon the Australian government to implement a Safe and Secure Skies Commission. This is going to allow an independent body which will bring workers, passengers and regional communities together to set minimum standards, but also provide a body that can be genuinely consulted with to make these decisions. We saw over COVID billions of dollars taxpayers' money went to Qantas, and it's only right that the community expects that when these significant decisions are made, they are not made solely in the interest of pursuing increased profits, but they are also forced to consider what the impact on workers and what the impact on regional communities in particular is going to be. Senators, the company that calls itself the Spirit of Australia is broken. And you speak to Qantas workers or former Qantas workers, and they tell you that a couple of decades ago, this was a company that they were really proud to work for. And I think you talk to passengers and they say the same thing. This is an airline that people wanted to fly. And I think after years of, in our view, poor executive decision-making, that's unfortunately no longer the case. But the Transport Workers Union is not prepared to accept that it can't be the case again. And we want Qantas to do better. We want them to live up to their promise that they made to the High Court, to treat their workers with more respect, to treat their passengers, frankly, with more respect than what they have done. And we're confident, and we're confident if they do, we can have a genuine partnership with them and ensure that we can work together. Not just for the sake of our thousands of members, but for the sake of the 24 million Australians that rely on Qantas. I'll leave my comments there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr Lynch. I do want to congratulate the TWU on the action you took against Qantas and the victory you got there for those workers. Just got a quick question. Yourself, you mentioned you were delayed by, I don't know, cancellation or some change this morning. Qantas's rationale for this centralisation is to seek to reduce the number of cancellations. What do you make of that particular claim, and would the relocation of these workers help in your view?
It certainly isn't going to help the communities that the workers are now being taken out of. So to illustrate that, when these changes do take place, it will be necessary for QLink to relocate workers the night before and to overnight them. Should one of those workers fall sick, as is not uncommon to have food poisoning in particular, that flight can't leave in the morning until a replacement worker can be relocated from Sydney, Brisbane or Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And the knock-on implications of that are significant. I think it's not for me to make Qantas's arguments. I think that they would say that this may have a marginal benefit in decreasing cancellations or delays for the major cities, but I would hope that even they would concede it will have a significant or significantly increase the risk of cancellations and delays for these regional bases that they're shutting down.
It does seem to me strange. I mean, do you know how many people Qantas do employ in the major centres in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane? Does anyone have that? No,
I don't have that.
It seems strange that, I mean, their statement said about 70 people are affected, although we had numbers, I mean, I think the flight attendant numbers are much lower than that. And so, while this is not obviously the biggest job loss that's ever happened in Australia, it is very devastating for those individuals. It's particularly for small towns and communities, it's tough. It just seems hard for me to understand how that few roles would make that much difference to the major transport hubs of our country, which we're going to require a lot more than 70 workers, even on Qantas's numbers.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think that if there is a benefit, it will be absolutely marginal, and the increased risk to these regional communities is going to be significant. And we're not talking about 20, 30-minute delay that I think we're all accustomed to. We're talking about hours and the knock-on implications of that.
It's very frustrating when that flight from Sydney doesn't arrive.
Senator Mackenzie, first opportunity to open the voting.
Thank you, Mr Lynch, for your testimony. So I just want to be really clear. The TWU has not seen the rationale or the metrics from Qantas to justify the decision of these base closures.
The position that we got from Qantas, and again, I don't want to. It's probably for them to make their arguments more than me.
No, I'm interested in what you got from Qantas.
The rationale that we received from Qantas was that this would reduce their delays coming out of these major hubs. And again, as I've already said, I question the impact that this is really going to have in reducing those delays.
But so the consultations you will have had with Qantas isn't just a phone call. You would have had to sit down, your negotiating teams would have had to sit down, go through whether you went to war or not, went to the mattresses or not. So I'm actually asking, have you seen the data that would back up? Has the TWU got the metrics, got the data from Qantas that justifies the claims they're making about what's going to occur to these workers?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. So we first heard from Qantas on the 10th of September, and the decision was made or announced on the 1st of October, and the impression that we got was that the consultation was never genuine. We don't have any detailed explanation. They have given an explanation that they tried to summarise, but nothing more substantively detailed than that.
So between the 10th of September and the 1st of October, how many meetings did the TWU have with Qantas?
3 meetings, I'm told. I was a part of one of them, but three meetings in total. Yep.
Okay, and we've heard from some of the affected parties. And I think it's fair to say the difference in shifting from particularly small regional centres like Mildura to large capitals, the differential in housing costs, etc. Did the TWU attempt to negotiate assistance for these workers in excess of the assistance to help move chattels between, the two homes?
Yeah, Senator, we did, and we continued to represent.
So what did you ask for? What did you ask Qantas for?
Well, it's almost a case-by-case basis because some workers are impacted differently to others and have different preferences in what they...
I'm happy in the Mildura case for you to go through specifics.
Well, unfortunately for the Mildura case, we don't have any members at that base. What I can say, though, is that the TWU's position from the beginning and remains that this decision should be reversed. Now, as you'd expect, we live in the real world and have to have these discussions with companies in the alternative, but our position remains that we think that this decision can be and should be reversed. Did
you raise the issue of redundancies being an option?
Yes, and I understand that that's been rejected from the company, and that remains their position, as I understand it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I'd just like to let Qantas know that I'll be asking those questions, so I'd like to see the rationale that the closure of these bases will actually materially address the cancellations and delays, not just in words. I would like to see the data. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Sterle.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to make a declaration that I am a 46-year member of the TWU. I'm a life member, ex-organiser, ex-yard delegate. I've been on, I can't tell you how many industrial actions with Qantas over the years as an organiser and as a senator. And I want to congratulate, I want to just echo your words, Senator Canavan, congratulate the TWU when Michael Cain, the National Secretary, against all odds, took on that fight for our 1,800 members that were sacked under the wing, and congratulations to the National Committee of Management backed them in. And if I were the judge, there would have been a lot more fine than the 90 million. They would have copped the whole damn lot. But anyway, thanks, Chair.
Oh, is that it? Comment,
I just
not a
want to
question.
make declare.
Madam
Oh, I
Secretary.
can.
It's important to make a declaration.
No, I did say a comment.
Thank you,
It's a comment.
Senator Delago.
Thanks very much. It's hard to follow that one there, Senator. Mr. Lynch, thanks very much for your submission as well and for coming along today. I note in your submission you made reference that with the current structures, the recent airline performance data shows that QantasLink, serving regional areas, has the best on-time arrival performance and a lower cancellation rate than the rest of the Qantas group. Yet Ms Yangoyan says in her submission that this isn't about profitability, it's about improving reliability. Your data and the data that's available from your submission is saying that QantasLink is already really well performing, and especially in these regional areas. Seems pretty curious.
Thanks for the question, Senator. And again, that's we question this rationale. It is for Qantas to defend these decisions, and I'm sure they will. But as you say, the QLink run times are actually reasonably good, and our strong suspicion is that these changes will, at best, make it marginally worse. At worst, it will make it significantly worse. So you've got to ask yourself, if it's not in the interest of the workers, if it's not in the interest of the commuters, what's it in the interest of? And I suspect that the only rational conclusion from that is that it's in the interest of increasing Qantas's profits.
And it was touched on earlier about Qantas has received an eye-watering amount of support from the taxpayer over the years. What sort of social licence do you believe that they have to regional communities, in particular Hobart, Mildura, Canberra, to service these areas?
Yeah, that's right. I think that they do have a social obligation to be in these communities. You walk through Sydney Airport and Qantas QLink are proudly talking about how they employ regional workers, and again, the spirit of Australia is something that they say a lot, but unfortunately haven't lived up to as much as they should have. And so I think that we are seeing Qantas failing to meet the expectations of the communities, particularly in these regional areas. But also, I make a brief comment, Senator, on I think that this does, as much as we are frustrated with Qantas's position here, this does reflect a crisis that the industry finds itself in. As I've reflected on before, Bonza, Rex, Tiger before that, we're seeing an industry that is struggling to, and Virgin as well, Virgin Australia, we're seeing an industry that is struggling to appropriately maintain itself without further regulation and without further protections. And we say that the way that we can ensure that the aviation industry is working for all Australians is to implement a Safe and Secure Skies Commission, so we can bring those workers and passengers and industry together and have these discussions in the best interest of the industry as a whole. Strong companies mean happy employees. So this isn't about destroying Qantas. This is about ensuring that the settings are right, that Qantas is working for Australians and is treating their workers with respect.
Doesn't seem like much to ask for. Mr. Lynch, are you aware of any of your members who have been given commitments from Qantas management that their bases were safe?
Yeah, we have, in particular, a couple of pilots that relocated in 2020 from Cairns to Hobart under the promise that that base would remain open. They moved their families, and in these two instances, off the top of my head, they moved their wives and their children. They had to find new schools. Their partners had to find new jobs. And now they're being told that, in effect, they're going to have to go through the same ordeal. they've been given promises about how long this is going to be for, and this is the last time. But how could you possibly believe that when it happened just 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago? So the impact on these workers is going to be significant, as you'd expect. And although we can talk about what a relocation package might look like, or what or even a redundancy might look like, at the end of the day, these people's lives, and you can't really put a dollar figure on that.
Their lives are being stuffed.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Are you just talk about some of these commitments about the base closures to staff? Are you aware of any recent sort of commitments between, whether it's your members or talking with the other unions representing workers in this cohort? Are you aware of any recent commitments that have been made?
No, I can't talk to any recent commitments. Yeah, the ones that we're aware of, the commitments are about 4 or 5 years old. But again, they were acted on in good faith, and now they're being told to move again.
Who do you believe made the decision to close these bases?
It's a question for Qantas, but I would expect that a decision this significant would be made by the senior leadership of Qantas.
And the board? Would the board have been informed?
I would have expected, but I have no direct knowledge of it.
Do you believe that this is a wider pattern of centralisation from Qantas in a longer-term strategy to maintain, obviously, market share at the expense of regional communities? Because it does sound like, when you look at the data on cancellations and delays, you are correct around the regional operation having better stats than major capitals. So it, to me, seems that, once again, regional communities are effectively going to be held hostage to meet KPIs elsewhere. Can you just talk through whether you see this as a broader pattern of behaviour and strategic intent from Qantas?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. And I think that it is certainly a broader pattern of behaviour. The workers I referred to were relocated because the base in Cairns closed. This is not the first time that they've thought of this idea. The consolidation across the East Coast through the 3 major cities. And I think that it also needs to be considered in the decisions that Qantas have made over the last 20 years. 15, 20 years ago, you worked for Qantas, you worked for one company. Now you work for one of 32, I believe it is, subsidiaries. This is a company that has made turning a profit into an art form. And again, we're not here to argue that Qantas shouldn't be profitable, but we are here to say that with the spirit of Australia and the Australian flag that they proudly fly on their planes comes with a broader obligation. So I think, Senator, absolutely, this is part of a broader pattern of behaviour of squeezing every last cent out of their workers and out of their passengers. And unfortunately, we're seeing that it's going to be regional commuters that are going to really pay the price for that.
So we heard some evidence earlier this morning around different state governments subsidising and supporting regional airlines or airlines flying into regional airports. Is that something the TWU would support in Victoria?
Look, it could be a solution, but I suspect it's probably just a band-aid solution. And
I think it works quite effectively in WA and can't remember the other place.
Queensland with Virgin.
Yeah. So is that something that should go national?
It could be something that this committee could look at, but again, what I would say is that to get outcomes, what is going to be more effective is the Safe and Secure Skies Commission, where we can have a genuine body of stakeholders.
That's my next question. So
Yeah.
the commission you mentioned, how much would that cost?
I don't know how much it would cost, but I wouldn't have thought that much. We already have it.
We don't know how. there's no budget submission that's gone in on setting this up?
Well, how it would operate is similar to the Road Transport Committee that currently already operates as a subcommittee of the Fair Work Commission. You would have the time of the commissioners that would have to chair the meeting, but ultimately it's the Transport Workers Union and other bodies that are going to appear there free of charge.
And is that funded by the Fair Work Commission, or does industry and the unions fund that?
That's funded by the Fair Work Commission, but the cost of that is negligible compared to the many millions you'd have to put into keeping these companies afloat or making decisions in the interest of the community.
And is it still the TWU's view that we nationalise RRACs?
Well, it's. I think that what the TWU wants to see from
It's a
RRACs.
simple yes or no, Mr Lynch.
No, because sorry, Senator, I accept the question, and I think that what we need to see from RRACs is a company that is operating and servicing the regional communities in particular.
Well, I would argue what we need is regional communities to be serviced by an aviation industry that offers affordable, safe flights that are reliable. How that happens is another question, which is why I asked if you still want RRACs to be government-owned.
Only in the event that a private...
so it's a yes.
Well, we want to see RRACs succeed, and we want all options to be explored in order to achieve that, and hopefully it doesn't come to government ownership of the airline. Hopefully we can do it with private equity.
And a lot of
Thanks,
taxpaying
Senator. I'll go back to Senator Delago. There was an interruption there, but I'll give you enough time. Senator Delago, over to you.
That's okay, Senator. Ms Lynch, just finally, and you would know this, spending quite a bit of time in Tasmania yourself, that we don't have the same transport alternatives as, that are on the Big Island. Business, health, some people to get it to work. We rely on the airways to be able to do this, to do our business. Do you think that there's a risk for Tasmanian customers and passengers that this base closure will impact on services in Tasmania?
I'd say absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We see Tasmania in particular has a heavy reliance on the tourism industry, and further cancellations of flights or flight insecurity is of course going to have an impact on tourism. Likewise, the health implications in a smaller state like Tasmania that does rely on flying in healthcare workers, for example. This isn't just a matter of making people like myself that flies to Tasmania regularly slightly inconvenienced. This could have much broader societal implications if we do see those run times and those cancellation risks increase to Tasmania. So it's absolutely going to have broader implications if our worst fears are realised and these run times go through the floor.
And in your experience, or in your union's experience, whenever there's a base closure, like say you spoke about Cairns in the past, have you noticed differences in services to the community since that time?
To be fair, Senator, we haven't looked into it,
yeah.
And it is a good question. It's something we should take a look at. But you would surely expect that yes, that would have to happen. But to be fair, we haven't looked into that in the case of Cairns.
Thank you. My Tasmanian colleague has got some questions, I'm sure. So.
Thank you, Senator Lake. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Lynch, it was interesting you mentioned the Cairns closure, and we know that you mentioned that some pilots relocated to Hobart following that. It seems very unfair that they weren't alerted that there was potential closure around the corner, having just moved their lives to another town to then be in this situation. Was the Cairns closure do you know if that was part of like an assessment by Qantas into restructuring their regional bases? Because we've obviously heard there was a process they went through, but do you know if that was prior to that?
Yeah, I think it would have to be, but I'm not across the
Okay.
intimate details of it. But I would expect that it would be. But it'd have to it'd be a question that Qantas, I imagine, could answer more fulsome way.
Obviously, Tasmania is an island. We're a long way from where the other bases are and where the flights may originate from. It's been brought to my attention by workers in other airports like Launceston and Wynyard and Devonport that the base in Hobart does help. Provides a reserve contingency, I suppose, for engineers and cabin crew and pilots in case of problems in the other smaller airports in Tasmania. Is that your understanding as well? Like, will this impact, rather than us just focusing on Hobart, will this impact the other bases, in your opinion, in Tasmania?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have 15 cabin crew and 17 pilots, as we do currently in Hobart, that is a resource that can be drawn upon when there are illnesses or absences for whatever reason, in both, in particular, Devonport and Launceston. And we will now see that in the event that there are illnesses or absentees from employees that have been overnighted the previous day, the delays, and I can't understate this, the delays will be enormous because the flight can't leave unless it's got a full crew. So you're taking that resource away, and the implications are then going to be that it's not just Hobart, that you have one overnighter that falls ill, and that's it for the day, really. You're going to have the same in all the other Tasmanian airports that QLink fly into.
And do you know if there'll be a Tasmanian-based engineer?
I don't have that detail, only because we don't represent those workers.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was just wondering if maybe Jetstar, if there might be some kind of cooperation there with Jetstar with providing those services. But if you knew about that, you could perhaps take that on notice. Happy
to take it on notice.
If you know anything. I think Qantas have claimed that pilots and cabin crew don't tend to get sick on overnights at outports. I have a bit of an issue with Hobart being capital city of my state being called an outport. It's not a major port, but I think there's obviously legal definitions around that with CASA and regulations. Are you aware from your members whether there's been problems with let's call it resilience or reliability with the sickness of crew in Tasmania more than anywhere else? Or?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. We've heard that it's something that happens. I wouldn't say frequently, but it does happen. And I guess the point is when it does happen, it only takes one worker to get these workers are put up in hotels, so they're eating out. So the likelihood of getting food poisoning, for example, is higher than you would be if you're at home. All it takes is for one of them to go down, and that flight can't leave until you can somehow get a worker to relocate from the mainland, which is, in Hobart's case, at absolute best going to be an hour and 20 minutes. It's more likely going to be 3 or 4 hours at best. So we don't have the data on that, and I'm sure Qantas will bring that. But the experience of our membership is that it's something that does happen.
And has crew sickness been highlighted to you at all as a reason to close the base or an excuse to close the base?
That overnight workers might fall ill?
Well, I suppose more going on the fact that from Qantas's, in terms of resilience, Qantas's claim is that this will make our regional services more resilient because pilots and crews don't tend to get sick when they go on overnights to outports, whereas you get more sickness in your local staff at your local base.
Right.
That's their claim. Have you seen any evidence to support that?
I haven't seen any evidence to support it, and it doesn't seem to stand to reason either. You're more likely to get sick. You would have thought away from your home and away from your family, away from being able to cook your own meal. I haven't seen any data on it, and to be fair, I don't have any data to the contrary, but it certainly doesn't make a great deal of sense to me.
Are you aware of any concerns around underutilisation of Hobart crews, especially in recent months by Qantas?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So I understand that pilot and cabin crews have been on long periods of reserve in Hobart for several months, well, even though they've been willing and available to work, while, several crews from other bases overnight in Hobart. And have you heard anything along those lines?
Not specifically, but it doesn't surprise me. But no, I haven't.
Yeah, I just wonder if they could have, if Hobart crews have been rostered this way, whether that could have been utilised more efficiently, and could I suppose shine some light on this non-resilience claim.
Yeah, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't. I'm not aware of it, so can't.
No, if you could take that on notice, if there was anything, anything you did know. And I think Senator DeLega's asked the questions on who's ultimately behind this in terms of this decision.
A lot of people are wondering that.
Yes, yeah, a lot of people are wondering. Are your members? Do you feel that there's been a generous enough package offered to affected crews for in terms of the costs of the crew for relocation?
Look, as I said before, the TW's position is that the decision should be reversed.
Yep.
And that's the view of our membership as well. In terms of whether the offer is generous enough or not, I mean, it definitely could be better. And in particular, I think that given the size of these changes, redundancies really should be offered. And at the moment, they're not. So ultimately, it's for an individual member to decide whether what's been put on the table is fair or works for them. The view that instructions that we've got from our membership is that the current offer is not ideal, and that the ideal situation would be to reverse this decision and to allow these workers to keep doing what they love doing, and that's working for Qantas in the town that they live in.
In terms of the obviously the personal cost, which is you can't quantify, and we shouldn't try and quantify in monetary terms, what kind of experiences was there over COVID for your members with being forced to work and move to capital cities again for long periods of time during COVID, and why didn't Qantas learn from that and the impact that had on staff?
Yeah, well, there was significant impacts to aviation workers over COVID, the most notable of which is, of course, the 1,820 workers that were illegally sacked by Qantas. But flight attendants in particular, they were doing the Mercy flights from overseas, subjected a much larger, they were subjected to COVID more than the average person as a result. There was a range of changes, including the closure of the Cairns base, which happened around the same time. So it was aviation workers. I mean, no one had a great time over COVID, but aviation workers were really copped the brunt of the disruptions and really the poor and frankly disappointing and disgusting decisions by Qantas at the time in how they decided to treat their workers.
And many of these workers had worked for decades. Many decades in some cases for Qantas, but weren't supported or didn't feel supported.
Again, and I said this before, but it's worth reflecting on again. I think that you speak to workers that worked for Qantas, and this was a job that people wanted and were proud of a decade ago. This was something that a job that people really aspired to, and years of poor executive decisions, particularly by a former CEO, has led to that no longer being the case. This is a company where the workers, to the extent that the workers still work for Qantas, because, as I said, in many instances they don't anymore, they work for foreign-owned subsidiaries or foreign-owned outsourced companies. This is in many instances, this is a dramatic and egregious change of culture and change of perspective in how a company treats its workers, and it's very disappointing to see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wishwaston. I think Senator Sterle has some quick
Thanks,
questions.
Chair, and it goes to Senator Mackenzie's questioning to Mr Lynch around the Safe Skies Tribunal, to which I have not got a lot of information on, or a lot of knowledge on, I should say. But Mr Lynch referred to the road transport. So for the benefits of the committee and all those listening in Hansard, under the Fair Work Commission we have the dedicated road transport arm of the commission, to which under that sits the Road Transport Advisory Group, which is chaired by the two registered organisations, or made up of the two registered organisations, one being the Australian Road Transport Industrial Organisation, which their nominee is Peter Anderson from the VTA. On the other side is the Transport Workers Union, where sits Richard Olsen, who is the actual current president, national president of the Transport Workers Union. Under that sits the subcommittees. 47 sectors of the road transport industry all have their own subcommittee to which they can make recommendations to the Transport Advisory Group to go further up the chain to the Commission. It is all done voluntary. There is no cost in that, Senator. And I wish there was. I wish these people were paid for the effort that they put in. So if I can just clarify that. No cost to the department. And I don't even think they get a cup of tea and a bicky because they're not meeting on their premises. So if that assists the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Sterle. I just have a couple of quick ones. Just Senator Mackenzie also raised the issue of REX. I mean, we can stamp our feet here about Qantas. There's not a lot of direct control the government has, though, on commercial decisions. However, in the case of REX, the government has offered a capital injection and, I believe, a renegotiation of debt arrangements. I mean, do you think the government here could step into this breach and require, as part of these arrangements, for REX to have some staff based in regional hubs, perhaps in these hubs that have lost workers, to replace the lost business from Qantas's decision?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. And again, I think that these are all good ideas in terms of achieving the outcome we all want to achieve, and that's ensuring that regional communities are not an afterthought for these aviation companies. I haven't given great consideration to these ideas and to provide any sort of answer that's going to be of any use to the committee. What I would say, and I know I'm being repetitive, but I think that the solution is the Safe and Secure Skies Commission that's going to allow the industry to be properly regulated and have the views.
And how
of
will
the
that provide jobs in Mildura or Hobart?
Well, it would mean that any significant change, for example, so in the example of Q-Link, it would need to consult with the Safe and Secure Skies Committee, which would mean that...
To what end?
Well, they would also be able to make minimum standard orders and would potentially be able to prevent these changes.
But with all due respect, Mr Lynch, and I haven't heard of the Safe Skies Committee myself. I don't have much knowledge of it, just like Senator Sterle. But to date, and I'm open-minded to it, but it seems to me you're using the loss of jobs in these regional locations to push a barrow that you already want to anyway. I don't actually see much of a link of how that commission is going to help Mildura or Hobart or Canberra here. Yeah,
so Safe and Secure Skies Commission would be able to set minimum standards and minimum and make a range of orders that would require or could require, for example, regional workers to remain within a city. So I think that it would solve this problem, or at least prevent this problem from happening again in the future. As to the implications on REX, again, I haven't given it a great deal of thought, so I'm not sure I can provide a thoughtful... Absolutely, Senator, happy to.
Okay, thank you. And look, just finally from me, I mean, one of the issues we've got here, I think, is the shocking lack of competition in our airline sector.
Amen.
The concentration levels on our major routes would be defined as a serious lack of competition under US trade law. Has the TLU ever given consideration to the idea that with the failing of REX, Bonza, do we have to look at divestiture here in some of these companies? I mean, why is Jetstar allowed to operate with Qantas? Why don't we get serious about competition law in this country, get serious about some of the shocking behaviour we've seen from Qantas? As I say, I congratulate you for calling into account, but wouldn't the answer here to have more competition and finally adopt some divestiture powers here in this country, like there are in the US, like there are in most European countries, so that we can generate proper competition in airline services in Australia.
Yeah, Senator, look, at risk of frustrating the committee, we believe that the solution to that problem is the Safe and Secure Skies Commission. However, I will take your question on notice.
No, talking points.
Sounds like more union jobs,
Thank
though.
you.
All right, okay.
Jobs for
I
friends.
think competition would be even better, but maybe you could consider my humble suggestion. Thank you, Mr Lynch. You did take one question notice in the end. We've asked for those to be back on by Friday the 5th of December, if that's possible.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that and your evidence today. I hope you have a great weekend. I will now call representatives from the Airlines for Australia and New Zealand to come to the table. They're right there, so we'll keep moving.
Competitive prices. Yeah, no.
Okay, gentlemen ready? All good. I now welcome representatives from Airlines for Australia and New Zealand. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
Yes, Professor Graham Samuel, and I come as Chair of Airlines for Australia and New Zealand, which represents Rex, Qantas, Virgin and Air New Zealand.
Okay, and Mr Beckett?
Stephen Beckett, CEO of Airlines for Australia and New Zealand.
Thank you very much. You have the opportunity to make a short opening statement if you wish to. Would you like to take that up?
Thanks, Chair. Look, I will do so. And of course, Qantas will be able to give his own specific evidence, and I'm aware that a lot of the discussion already has taken place this morning relates to the Qantas moves in respect to its bases. This is not foreign to me, as I think some of the senators around the table will be aware. I spent 16 years dealing with competition policy, and particularly the 8 years of national competition policy from 1995 through to 2004. And right through that, one of the most sensitive areas was the impact on regional and rural Australia in terms of competition policy. It was there almost every day, and we had to deal with that issue. The issue was this. There is a fundamental requirement, and it's not just a governmental or a policy requirement, it's a fundamental demographic and social requirement that we provide services to rural and regional Australia. That's recognised. It's also recognised that those services will not be, in many cases, economically viable and need to have some support in one form or another. Well, how do we do it? Well, there's, in the context, and I'll deal now with airlines and how we deal there, in the context of airlines, well, one of the ways is just to increase flight charges. And flight charges are all very well, but of course that impacts upon those that are paying, particularly if the flight charges are going to be in terms of regional services. That doesn't seem to be terribly fair. Alternatively, you can do a cross-subsidy, and that could be by increasing flight charges in terms of what I call the urban domestic flights. The second one is the one that is probably more palatable across the board, and that is to lower costs. Now, some of the costs in the airline industry are not within the control of the airlines. And you'll have heard me say this before, and I know Senator McKenzie has heard me say this at a recent Parliamentary Friends of Aviation meeting that we had, and that is that costs like airport charges, security charges are totally outside the control of the airlines. The airports simply say, pay this or else. And this is not only with domestic or the major domestic airports, but is also particularly with regional airports where there's often been gold-plated developments occur to satisfy the local councils that own them. And they can cut a ribbon for a A380 to land for international flights, which are never ever going to occur. But I take an extreme example. So that's one of the issues: airport charges, security costs. The other one is to deal with costs in terms of efficiencies in operation, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Then the third one is the one that has been mentioned before, and Senator McKenzie, I think, focused on this, particularly with Queensland and WA. That's government subsidies. Now, I hope to tell you, Treasurers and Finance Ministers, through all the time that I was involved in competition policy, showed a marked reluctance to provide government subsidies. It hit the budget, and if they could do it by some hidden means, and we had this in telecommunications, had in airlines and the like, then what you do is you try and do a cross-subsidy that was hidden and that didn't go onto the budget. So if costs can't be reduced, you've got to go to efficiencies. And then the important element, and this is the one that we argued right through the 16 years I was involved in competition policy, was that companies and government ought to be involved in keeping minimal the human cost, that is, loss of jobs and or relocations, as the case may be. The only comment I would make in the context of what has occurred here and the matters that are before the committee, particularly today, is that Qantas seems to unusually, I have to say not for Qantas, but unusually for business, because business generally doesn't do it. Business generally takes a view, in the experience I had through that 16 years, of saying efficiencies are being brought about. It will maintain our profits, our economic viability, and job losses, someone else will have to sort that out. Now, Qantas has actually done something uniquely different here, where it said we will not have job losses. We will preserve the jobs in the industry, and what we'll do is we will provide for transport of workers to be able to deal with the services that they were formerly providing in the regional bases that have been closed. We will do so in a way that causes the minimal disruption to their families and to their careers, but ensures that they continue to have jobs. I have to say to you that in the experience I had in that 16 years, that is a most unusual approach to be adopted by business, and I commend them for it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. I might just start where we left off before. Obviously, as someone who formerly headed up the ACCC, be very familiar with the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, which is a measure of competition in a market. I've done some quick calculations here. I mean, it's no surprise, but the HHI for the sector is at least 3,000 for the domestic airline services. That's treating Jetstar as a separate entity, but if you treat them as part of the Qantas group, you actually get to a figure of 5,350. Now, typically, my understanding is that any measure over 2,500 is generally considered a highly concentrated market and would under US trade law, see significant amount of oversight. We've now had, of course, Rex go into administration. I'm including Rex in those considerations, but Bonza go out of business. I asked before about divestiture laws, but I mean, you've got the competition hat. This is a bit of a problem, I would say, for our country, this lack of competition. How do you think we can get more competition in airline services in Australia?
Well, Senator or Chair, if I can first take the issue of HHIs and CR4s. And I had to appear before a committee. I'm not sure if you were in that committee. It was a joint committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And I took to task one or two of those that were present, in particular, who is now, I think, the Assistant Minister for Competition, Andrew Lee, on the use of these HHIs and CR4s.
Yeah, of course, they're only a guide. But are you suggesting that somehow the market share concentrations in Australia are a sign of a competitive market?
Well, the problem, I think, is that...
I mean, you can use whatever measure you like, but we've got a shocking situation for lack of competition.
Well, bear with me, if I might, Chair, and I'll give an answer to the question you've raised. And that is that those concentration ratios, while they're a guide, they have been, in terms of competition experts and competition economists, they have gone out of fashion about two decades ago. And certainly when I was chair of the ACCC, I never, ever took much notice of them.
Well, if you haven't noticed, I'm a pretty unfashionable guy, Mr. Samuel, so I don't really care if they've gone out of fashion.
No, but
I care about how much Australians are paying for airfares, which is clearly some of the highest in the world. It's clearly because of the lack of competition we have.
Bear with me, Chair, so I can sort of conclude, because you've asked a question, I'll give you the answer. So both Stephen King, who's now on the Productivity Commission, he headed up our Mergers Committee, and I had a fundamental understanding that the real issue on competition was the outcome. And I had a very simple test, and that is, will a merger or will a structure in a particular industry lead to a greater capacity to raise prices or a greater capacity to lower services? Now, you'll say that we have limited competition in Australia. The problem is that when you compare us with the United States, you're comparing a population of 27, maybe 28 million with a population of 350 million. We're probably better to be compared with California as a state in terms of population, but we have a vast continent, and the geographic reach of the continent actually has various impacts on competition and the viability of a number of players in the industry. Now, there are some who still believe that 3 is better than 2, 4 is better than 3 and the like. I take a view, and Stephen King, my former colleague on the ACCC, take a view that what we've got to look at is the dynamics of competition, and the dynamics say this: if the country and the industry can afford 3 competitors that will be viable, terrific, we ought to have it. 4 competitors, we ought to have it. But in fact, history has shown over and over again over recent decades, it just doesn't work.
But that's because of the anti-competitive behaviour of your airlines. It clearly is. I mean, when Rex tried to go into Sydney and Melbourne, it was very clear that your airlines lowered prices at the exact times that Rex was operating. And they had limited aircraft, and they clearly engaged in predatory behaviour. Now, you mentioned we shouldn't compare to the US. I'm not going to compare us to the US. If you look at the OECD Airfare Price Index, we consistently rank in the top 5 in the world, in the developed world, for the cost of airline travel on a per kilometre basis. Now, given you represent the airlines, is that evidence wrong? Or do we pay some of the highest airline prices per kilometre in the world?
Well, in fact, if you look at exactly the same statistics, you'll find that we actually pay the highest airport charges in the world.
Is that the reason?
Well, that's one of the big reasons.
But just going back to my question, are we paying in the top 5 in the world for airline services per kilometre?
I haven't got
or maybe you could take that on notice for me.
I'll take that on notice. But let me also say that one of the reasons for that is the very significant airport charges that are paid and the security charges that are paid. So that's important. Now, let me go back to Rex, because Rex, I know, and as you recall, the former deputy chair and then chair of Rex was John Sharp, and well familiar to yourself and to Senator McKenzie. The best overseer of competition in terms of competitive complaints against Qantas and Virgin was John Sharp. And I can tell you that almost every week he would put in a complaint to the ACCC about Qantas's behaviour. Not once over a period of 18 months did the ACCC form a view that the complaints that were raised by John Sharp had any validity.
Well, I think the ACCC has hopelessly failed here, because clearly if we've got some of the highest prices in the world, something is shocking. I suppose if you're not contesting the evidence, so what is your suggestion? Is your suggestion that if we just lower airport charges, that would stop that would take us into the average of costs? I mean, have you done any work on this? Because I'm sick and tired of paying these prices. I live in a regional location. The cost of travelling now from Rockhampton to Brisbane is just through the roof, and it hurts our businesses, it hurts families. When people have emergencies, they've got to pay through the roof, and Qantas and Virgin are all taking us for a ride, and it's got to stop.
Well, with respect, Chair, I think that you are probably not acknowledging the fierce competition that exists between Qantas and Virgin, particularly as Virgin now has been restructured with significant support behind it, and it is no longer a company in administration. It's a company that's now operating with a focus on both its strategy and its costs. Now, I don't know about you, but I make many of my own bookings, and I know that I can look at any particular point of the day and compare the costs, particularly if you go into some of the travel groups, like Webjet and the like. I can compare the costs, and the costs can vary very significantly at any point of time. So all I can say to you, Chair, is that if you're concerned about the cost, have a look at the competition. It is there, it's vigorous. But you don't need 3 or 4 or 5 airlines to have competition. 2 vigorous competitors can be highly competitive and can get the cost down. I want to go back to Rex very quickly, because you complained about the fact, or you mentioned that Rex went into administration because of some activities on the part of, I think, Qantas and Virgin, as you I don't want to verbally, but I think that was a suggestion. No, with respect, sir, that was not the case. Rex went into administration for 3 or 4 reasons. The first was that it had dysfunctionality around its board, and it couldn't agree on a strategy. The second was that it started to go into domestic routes, the main triangle of Brisbane, Sydney,
the
Golden Triangle, yeah. But the problem was they didn't market it. No one actually knew that they were there. And then the third problem was, and that was part of the dysfunctionality around the board, is that the marketing was not agreed to by the then chair before John Sharp assumed that role. And then the third problem was that they had set their schedules at times that didn't actually suit the major customer base. Now, for those that use Rex, it was a very, very adequate and satisfactory travel partner, party to use.
So, Professor Samuel, with respect,
would probably mean very little.
Slot access into Sydney Airport
I'm pleased you raised that.
A significant impact on a raft of those outcomes, including the scheduling. But I know Senator Canavan was going to another. I have to wait my turn.
Okay, all right.
I'll
Well,
come
look,
back
I
to you.
will finish up. And sorry to distract the committee. I get a bit worked up because it affects my community a lot. And I just wanted to clarify. I wanted to clarify that what I put to you was what's been put to me, that at the specific times that Rex would operate, on the Sydney-Melbourne route in particular, that Virgin or Qantas would massively discount their fares just at those times. And because Rex didn't have a significant fleet of aircraft, they had little flexibility to respond. And clearly, to me, if that is true, that's quite predatory conduct, and I'm sure we'll get some more evidence in this committee about that, whether or not that happened.
Can I give a response to that?
Sure.
Yeah, because it's important. If the impact of Rex was to cause Qantas and Virgin to discount their fares, that's good. That's really good.
It's not good if it's below cost.
No, sorry. It is good. It is good if the result is that there is competition between three parties.
There's not now. Now they can put it back up. That's the whole point of predatory behaviour.
Rex went into administration. Rex went to administration. I'm happy to deal with the slot issue if you'd like me to, because I watch.
will wait my turn.
All right, okay.
There are very
We might rotate because I took up way too much time. I'm sorry. I apologise to the committee. We were going so well, but Senator, I'll shut up now. Senator Wilson.
It's certainly very interesting, and I would be interested in feedback between the trade-off for costs of fares versus reliability and service as well, because when we looked at getting potential penalties in place, like we see in other countries for delays or cancellations, the airlines shot back pretty quickly and said if you do that, prices are going to go up.
Well, they probably also raised the issue of air services, and which the government, and whether the government was going to compensate for losses.
Yeah.
We had a recent situation, I think it was in Brisbane, of cancellation of how many flights?
More than 10.
More than 10 flights.
Yeah.
Because air services closed down a runway. We have constant delays occurring in Sydney.
I get it. Like you, I travel every week, so I'm very familiar with the different. And also, I think Senator Stell's asking about the issue with the slots, whether that's been solved. But maybe we'll come back to that, because I've got some questions about your submission in relation to the.
I can't get someone to ask me a question about the slots. I'd love to give an answer.
We'll come back to that in a second. I just want to get through this. So you make
1 minute.
You make a number of valid points in your submission. In just thinking about economic theory, but for example, challenges in regional aviation affordability. You talk about market dynamics being shaped by rising from servicing small passenger volumes in areas with high input costs. Would you classify Hobart as being small passenger volumes?
Look, I haven't got that detail.
No.
But if you compare it to the Golden Triangle, if you compare it to Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane, yes, it's a small operation.
And seasonal.
Hobart.
And seasonal.
Yeah.
It may become winter seasonal if we get a team in Tasmania for the AFL.
So seasonal. I'll let that one go to the Cape. I'd certainly like to see a Tassie team.
So would I.
But do you think that's the reason? Well, actually, let me be more specific. Airport charges. You make a valid point that comes up time and time again. But would that have any bearing on whether a company kept its base in place? And the charges are going to be there anyway, right?
No,
regardless of whether they've got a home base or not.
Senator, we got drawn into this issue through some questions that the Chair asked me.
I understand.
So if we're going back to the issue of services and bases, I think that they're different issues. And I think what, as I read it and as I understand it, what Qantas has done here is to say, we've got to bring out efficiencies in terms of the way that we service the flights that are coming in and out of certain, I'll call them regional airports. Hobart probably wouldn't want to be described as that. And so the efficiencies are achieved by relocating the bases, but ensuring that the workers are able to travel and not lose jobs. But it's a different issue, the airport charges.
But the point you make, it's probably a very valid point about the airport charges being a significant part of the airline, and it is actually a very valid point, but it doesn't have any bearing on this argument about whether we have a home base or not, though, does it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great. You talk about recruitment and retention of skilled labour is an area too. I don't think that would also apply to a base like Hobart or Canberra. being, they're not.
I wouldn't have that detail, I'm sorry.
Okay. And also the Qantas-based review alignment with global practice and consumer benefits. You say the key benefits include the primary objective of consolidating crew bases is to ensure aircraft and crew are positioned to deliver reliable schedules and meet passenger needs. Key benefits include optimised schedules and on-time performance, faster response to disruptions, operational resilience. We've received evidence so far that it's the opposite case, that they're closing the base in places like Hobart and Canberra and Mildura would have the opposite effect.
You'd have to address those questions to Qantas, Senator. I'm sorry, that's getting into detail. That's beyond what I'm here to talk about the more general issues that impact upon airlines across the board.
Yeah, okay, but you do. Just to be fair, Professor, you do have a section in your submission which says benefits of base consolidation for consumers. So focusing on consumers, and you do say this is happening all around the world. You've made 3 points there about how it's basically good for consumers, but we're hearing this is going to cause more problems for consumers. Having the reserve capacity removed from a place like Tasmania, where you don't have pilots or crew or engineers, is going to cause more problems.
Senator, so are you able to source that evidence that you're talking about?
Yes. Well, we can get the Hansard. We can go through Hansard transcripts with you. It's what we've heard this morning.
Yeah.
So, certainly, if you look at the
is it on modelling or is it anecdotal?
The evidence from the Flight Attendants Association of Australia was very clear about that.
Yeah.
But probably not the subject of modelling, is it? It's more anecdotal.
Yeah, but let's talk about modelling. I'd certainly be keen for Qantas to provide their modelling on why they think this is going to increase resilience. Yep. Have you seen that modelling, Mr. Beckett?
We haven't seen the modelling, but
so we're going to have a modelling war here.
If you gave me modelling, I'm not sure I'd decipher it appropriately anyway. It is an expert area within aviation that does all of this modelling, the network design and redesign. I have worked at an airline.
Yep.
I've worked at an airport. Regularly, airlines are in conversations about where they base people. Where they start their day, where their planes and their people are, has a direct impact on their services. One of the key things here is we've got an aviation white paper at the moment that is dedicated to making sure that Australians get the service that they ask for, that the schedules are more resilient, that airlines fly on time that they say they should, and Qantas is actually doing one of those things to make sure that it is a resilient airline and it is responding better, as airlines do around the world, as aeromedical providers owned by governments do. So air service, if you're the Royal Flying Doctors or you regularly work out where population movements are and where to base your appliances, as does the Department of Defence.
Mr. Beckett, I respect you've worked for an airline and for an airport, but we've heard from people who represent hundreds of thousands of workers, and that's the feedback we're getting from people who, like yourself, have experience in the airlines, and it's very different to what's provided in your submission. I'm just making that point.
Yeah. One of the important things, Senator, just because there were questions about services to Hobart, in September of this year, Qantas has launched new Perth to Hobart services, and Hobart to Newcastle is a new service that will be starting in December. So you're actually seeing at this time the airlines putting on more services into Hobart, which you were particularly interested in.
I was. I'd like to see more into Launceston, to be honest. That's what I'm particularly interested in. But and Devonport as well. So I'll go to Senator Delega.
Thanks for that, and thanks for coming in today, Professor Samuels. In your submission, you note that when it comes to fares, that major cost drivers include labour. Are frequently higher in regional areas, but some evidence that we've heard is that Qantas pays people lower in regional areas, and that they're not, because it's more expensive to operate. Do you think that workers should be paid less because they operate in regional areas?
I don't think that's for us to get into, Senator. I think that's a question.
Well, you're the union that represents Qantas as your member. Do you think that do you think that when you're citing labour costs as a factor, but Qantas seems to, through their structures, pay workers less in regional areas, do you think that that's appropriate?
Well, the only experience I can give you, Senator, is going back in my own career to when I was involved in investment banking. And it was quite clear that, for example, if someone was to be located in Sydney, they would need extra remuneration to cover the higher cost of being in Sydney versus being in Melbourne or versus being in Brisbane. So I can only comment in the context of that, that comparison. But it's a reality of life that if you're going to be working in Sydney, cost of housing, cost of various services is far greater, and therefore higher remuneration is necessary to attract workers there.
It's pretty bloody expensive to live in Hobart too, though, Professor.
I haven't got those details. I'm sorry, Senator.
Right. But so you don't really have an answer about paying people less in regional areas? Or?
Senator, perhaps I can ask. A lot of the inputs that go into the cost of an airfare, whether it be an airport charge or the like, when you talk to, say, Darwin Airport or other airports in other places, many of the justifications they have for the inputs that go into what they charge airlines and the charges they levy that consumers pay are based on particular skill sets are difficult to find in regional areas, and it requires them to pay more.
Which is why they should be kept in regional areas.
Exactly right.
Yes. One team, one dream here.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, gents. I think we're going to get you back, Professor Samuel. I'm going to have a panel of former ACCC commissioners because I think you will be very lonely amongst them on the question of divestiture powers. We had a Senate inquiry into bilateral arrangements, and former Commissioner Rod Sims
and indeed
Alan Fels,
they love divestiture and they love to regulate.
All agreed that in this instance, with the market share and market dominance and how that dominance is used within our aviation industry by Qantas, would benefit from the threat of a big stick. So we'll get into that in another day.
I would welcome coming along, but please let me also bring a couple of my own former commissioners, Stephen King, Joe Damasi, very qualified
We'll
people,
take advice.
and I might say economists
We'll
who
take
probably
advice on that.
are more...
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, but I do have some actual questions around the price. So I'm hearing, when I first got the job as the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, I met the airlines and I met the airports, and the word frenemies was thrown out at quite a few of those. Frenemies. Friends and equally enemies between airports and the airlines in terms of coming to those agreements. So I hear from you, as representing the airlines, the high charges that passengers pay are as a result of the airports. I would like to know, when we've talked about security costs being passed on to passengers, etc., lack of competition driving up prices. If jet fuel has dropped by 12% over the last 12 months, why hasn't that cost reduction been passed on to the Australian consumers through lower ticket prices?
I haven't got the exact statistics.
It's out of I think the ACCC's latest report.
Yeah.
But I can maybe take it on notice.
Yeah, I'll take that one on notice.
Because we've talked a lot about prices going up as a result of input costs and the behaviour of airports and the like. But when there is an opportunity to pass cost savings back down through to passengers, I'd like to know why those opportunities are seen as a great win for the bottom line rather than a great win for local passengers, particularly regional passengers.
Yeah. Let me take that on notice, but I'd simply observe that the airline monitoring reports done by the ACCC need a lot more closer examination than perhaps you've given me just there.
I just also wanted to understand the basis on which Qantas has made the claims about the reliability benefits, and if you've seen, not modelling, but at least their metrics or their rationale for making that claim.
Well, I think you'll have the opportunity to talk to Qantas after I'm finished, or after we're finished, so you'll be able to get that detail from them.
Okay. We'll see you next year.
Well, you don't want to talk about slots?
We'll talk about them next year.
We finish on slots, please.
Well,
I think we're going to have a whole day on slots.
So, and I know I took up a lot of time, so if people are very insistent, I'm happy to be generous,
I'm
but
keen.
I did think we wanted to get
stick to our
to
timetable.
Qantas. So, all right, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr Samuel, Mr Beckett. You did take some questions on notice. We're asking for those back by
And
the
we
5th
will
of
see you
December.
again.
Have a great weekend. We'll now break for lunch. If everyone's okay, we'll stick to the 12:30
thank you.
resumption. So I suspend the